Maria Santos Rivera died on a Tuesday morning in her suburban Los Angeles home while her husband was at work and her children were at school. The 38-year-old Filipina-American housewife was stabbed 17 times in her own kitchen by someone she knew intimately, someone who had been inside her home dozens of times before, someone whose mother lived just 3 houses down the quiet, tree-lined street. The weapon was a knife from Maria's own kitchen block, a wedding gift from 15 years earlier. Her blood soaked into the white tile floor she had mopped just the day before, spreading beneath the refrigerator covered with her children's artwork and family photos from happier times. When her husband Robert found her body 6 hours later, the scene was so horrific that the first responding officer, a 20-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department, had to step outside to compose himself before securing the crime scene. This is the story of how an affair born from loneliness, nurtured in secret, and ending in rejection, became a brutal murder that destroyed 2 families and shattered the illusion of safety in a close-knit Filipino-American community where everyone knew everyone else's business, or at least thought they did. The neighborhood of Cypress Park in northeast Los Angeles, where Maria Santos Rivera lived and died, looked like the embodiment of the American dream for immigrant families who had worked hard to achieve middle-class stability. Wide streets lined with mature jacaranda trees, well-maintained single-family homes with neat lawns and American flags hanging from front porches, minivans parked in driveways, children's bicycles left on sidewalks. This was not the Los Angeles of Hollywood glamour or gang violence that dominated news coverage. This was the Los Angeles of working families, of parents who left for work before dawn and returned after dark, of kids who walked to the local elementary school in groups, of weekends spent at backyard barbecues and birthday parties where everyone in the neighborhood was invited. The area had a significant Filipino-American population, drawn by affordable housing and the presence of family members who had immigrated decades earlier. On any given Sunday, you could walk down Cypress Avenue and smell adobo cooking in half a dozen kitchens, hear Tagalog being spoken on front porches, see groups of men playing basketball at the local park while their wives caught up on community gossip. It was the kind of neighborhood where people still looked out for each other, where elderly neighbors had their groceries carried inside by teenage boys, where block parties were organized through group text messages and everyone contributed food. The Santos Rivera family had lived on Cypress Avenue for 12 years, moving in when Maria was pregnant with their second child. They were considered pillars of the local Filipino community. Robert Rivera worked as an IT manager at a downtown firm, often putting in 60-hour weeks to support his family and maintain their comfortable lifestyle. Maria was involved in everything at their church, organizing fundraisers, coordinating the children's choir, hosting prayer groups at their home. Their 2 children, 14-year-old Joshua and 11-year-old Emily, were excellent students who participated in multiple extracurricular activities. To their neighbors, the Riveras represented success and stability. No one suspected that behind the perfectly maintained facade, Maria was desperately lonely, feeling invisible in her own home, and seeking connection in the most dangerous place possible, just 3 houses down the street. Maria Santos was born in Manila, Philippines, in a modest neighborhood where large families lived in small houses and everyone's business was known to everyone else. She was the eldest of 4 children, raised in a traditional Catholic household where her mother taught her that a woman's primary purpose was to serve her family, that marriage was forever, and that personal happiness came second to duty and obligation. Maria was a bright, ambitious girl who dreamed of becoming a teacher, who loved to read, who wanted to see the world beyond the crowded streets of her neighborhood. She finished high school with excellent grades and began attending a local college, working part-time at a restaurant to help pay tuition and contribute to her family's expenses. It was at that restaurant, a place that catered to American tourists and business travelers, where she met Robert Rivera. He was a second-generation Filipino-American, born and raised in Los Angeles, working in Manila for 6 months on a technology project for his company. Robert was handsome, confident, spoke English with an American accent, and represented everything Maria associated with opportunity and a better life. He was kind to her, tipped generously, and always asked about her studies. Their courtship was brief but intense. Robert extended his stay in Manila by 3 months, taking Maria to nice restaurants, movies, shopping trips to malls where she had only window shopped before. He talked about life in America, about opportunities for advancement, about the Filipino community in Los Angeles that would make her feel at home. He asked her to marry him after 5 months, promising to sponsor her immigration to the United States. Maria's mother approved of the match, seeing it as a chance for her daughter to have a better life and potentially help the rest of the family immigrate eventually. Maria was 23 when she married Robert in a small ceremony in Manila, 24 when she arrived in Los Angeles with a green card and high hopes for her new life in America. The reality of immigration was harder than she had imagined. She missed her family desperately, struggled with homesickness, found the sprawling city of Los Angeles overwhelming and impersonal compared to the tight-knit community she had left behind. Robert worked long hours, leaving early and returning late, often too tired to do much more than eat dinner and watch television. Maria found herself alone in their small apartment most days, without friends, without family, without the support system she had always known. When she became pregnant with Joshua 6 months after arriving in the United States, she was thrilled to have a purpose and focus. Motherhood gave her days structure and meaning, but it also increased her isolation. Robert's career advanced rapidly, requiring longer hours and frequent travel. By the time Emily was born 2 years later, they had moved to the house on Cypress Avenue in a neighborhood with other Filipino families, and Maria had found a community through the local Catholic church. She threw herself into being the perfect wife and mother, cooking elaborate meals, keeping an immaculate home, volunteering at her children's schools, organizing community events. From the outside, her life looked full and successful. Inside, Maria felt increasingly empty. She loved her children fiercely, but as they grew older and more independent, she felt her purpose shrinking. She loved Robert, or at least the memory of the man he had been in Manila, but their emotional connection had eroded over years of him being physically present but emotionally distant. Maria was 38 years old, living in a beautiful home, married to a successful husband, raising 2 wonderful children, and feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. She wanted to be seen, to be desired, to feel like a woman instead of just a wife and mother. That vulnerability, that hunger for connection and validation, would make her susceptible to attention from the most dangerous possible source. The Rivera marriage had started with genuine affection and optimism, but had slowly calcified into a partnership focused on practical matters rather than emotional intimacy. Robert was not a bad husband by most conventional measures. He was faithful, worked hard to provide financial security, never raised his voice or his hand, attended important family functions, and was involved with his children when his schedule allowed. But he was emotionally unavailable in ways that left Maria feeling like a housekeeper and childcare provider, rather than a partner and lover. They had not had a meaningful conversation about anything other than household logistics or the children's activities in months, possibly years. Their physical relationship had become perfunctory and infrequent, occurring maybe once a month when both happened to be awake and in bed at the same time, which was rare given Robert's habit of working late and falling asleep on the couch. Maria could not remember the last time Robert had asked her how she was feeling, what she was thinking, what she dreamed about. She could not remember the last time he had really looked at her, seeing her as Maria, and not just as his wife who kept the household running. The distance between them had grown so gradually that neither had noticed how far apart they had drifted. Robert saw himself as a good provider who was sacrificing time with his family to ensure their financial security and his children's futures. He worked 60-hour weeks, traveled for business, took on additional projects for promotions and raises. In his mind, he was demonstrating love through provision. What he did not see was his wife's increasing loneliness, her need for emotional connection, her hunger to feel desired and appreciated. Maria tried to communicate her feelings several times over the years, but these conversations always ended the same way. Robert would promise to work less, to spend more time at home, to be more present. He would follow through for a few days or weeks, then slowly slip back into his old patterns. Eventually, Maria stopped trying. She told herself that this was simply what marriage looked like after 15 years, that expecting passion and romance was childish and unrealistic, that she should be grateful for a stable home and a faithful husband. She buried her dissatisfaction deep inside, where it festered and grew into resentment she barely acknowledged even to herself. Financial pressures added stress to an already strained relationship. Despite Robert's good income, the cost of living in Los Angeles was crushing. The mortgage payment, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance on their house consumed a significant portion of Robert's salary. There were also the costs of raising 2 children in an expensive city, school supplies and fees, sports and music lessons, healthcare, clothing, food, and the constant pressure to keep up with other families in the neighborhood. Maria felt guilty spending money on herself, rarely buying new clothes or personal items, cutting her own hair to save the cost of salon visits. Every dollar spent had to be justified, weighed against the family's needs and future expenses. This constant financial pressure meant that Robert felt he could not afford to work less, that he had to pursue every opportunity for advancement and additional income. It also meant that Maria felt trapped. She had considered getting a job to contribute financially and to have something for herself outside the home. But the income she could earn with her limited work experience and education would barely cover childcare costs. Robert was not opposed to her working, but he also made it clear that it could not interfere with her primary responsibilities of managing the household and caring for the children. Maria felt caught between the traditional expectations she had been raised with and the reality of modern life where most families needed 2 incomes. The cultural dynamics of their relationship added another layer of complexity. Maria had been raised with very traditional ideas about gender roles and marriage. A good wife supported her husband's career, maintained a beautiful home, raised obedient children, and did not complain about her lot in life. She knew that if she talked to her mother or older relatives about her unhappiness, they would tell her she was being ungrateful, that she had a good life by any reasonable standard, that marriage required sacrifice and compromise. Robert, despite being American-born, had absorbed many of these same cultural values from his own parents. He expected dinner on the table when he got home, a clean house, well-behaved children, and a wife who managed all the domestic responsibilities without burdening him with complaints. This dynamic had worked for his parents' generation, but it left Maria feeling like she was living in the 1950s while watching other women her age pursuing careers, traveling, having adventures. She loved her children and did not regret the choice to focus on family, but she also felt like she had disappeared into her roles as wife and mother, losing any sense of herself as an individual. By the spring of the year she would die, Maria's marriage had become a hollow shell. She and Robert were roommates who shared financial obligations and parenting duties, but had no emotional or physical intimacy. They did not fight because fighting would have required caring enough to be angry. They simply existed in parallel lives that occasionally intersected over practical matters. Maria felt invisible, undesired, and desperately lonely. That loneliness made her vulnerable to someone who would see her, who would desire her, who would make her feel alive again, even if that someone was wildly inappropriate and dangerously obsessed. The Cooper family had lived on Cypress Avenue even longer than the Riveras, having moved into their house 28 years earlier, when Thomas Cooper first got his job